Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this special lunchtime or breakfast time presentation. We are joined by Kira Lichtenfeld, one of our campers, who emailed me a couple weeks ago to see if there might be a good time for her to make a presentation about climate change. She's been going through some climate change education programs and is really passionate about the topic. Enough so that she was excited to share her knowledge with the whale camp community and help us learn a little bit more about such a pressing issue. So my name is Amy, I'm the camp director, and I recognize almost everybody. And we're excited to have some family, some of Kira's family joining us as well. So thanks everyone for being here. And I'm gonna hand things over to Kira.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for coming. And I also want to thank Amy and the rest of the Whale Camp staff for giving me this opportunity. So I'm just going to share my screen and then we'll get started. Okay, so this picture is called the Blue Marble and it was taken in 1972. And it's become very iconic because it shows us Earth's beauty and reminds us that we share a common home. So when talking about climate change, it's first important to understand the greenhouse gas effect, which is the natural heating of the Earth by heat trapping gases. So first, energy from the sun goes through the atmosphere as light. Then most of the radiation is absorbed by Earth and heats the Earth. Some energy goes back out into space. And because of the natural layer of greenhouse gases, some of the heat is trapped in our atmosphere. And this is actually a good thing because it allows for life on Earth because it creates a suitable temperature on Earth for life. If the greenhouse gases weren't there, the heat would just all escape back out into space. But the problem is that there's too much greenhouse gas buildup and there's too much heat being trapped. And that's basically global warming, and that's at the heart of the climate crisis. So you may be wondering, why is this layer of greenhouse gases getting so thick? Well, we're emitting over 150 million tons of man-made global warming into our atmosphere every day. And so the main greenhouse gas that we emit is carbon dioxide, which is mainly produced from the burning of fossil fuels. And fossil fuels are used for electricity, transportation, and many other things in our everyday lives. So of the extra heat that the Earth is absorbing, 93% of it goes into our oceans. And this leads to many problems, which we'll talk about later. So this graph shows ocean temperatures from 1940 until now, and as you can see, because of global warming, the ocean temperatures are steadily increasing, and 2020 is expected to set a new record for high ocean temperatures. So now we're going to shift a little bit to talk about ice. So this is the Arctic, and you can see the mass of floating ice in the middle and Greenland to the left. 90% of the sun's rays bounce off the ice, but as the ice melts, the ocean begins to absorb that heat. And this is because light surfaces reflect sunlight and dark surfaces like the ocean absorb sunlight. As you can see, in the last 1,500 years, the amount of ice in the Arctic has dramatically decreased, especially in recent years. So before 2000, the Arctic sea ice goes up and down, but it stays around the same line. And right before 2000, it severely drops off. And the air temperature is increasing in the Arctic as well. In this town in Siberia, it reached over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is probably the hottest temperature ever recorded north of the Arctic Circle. And these temperatures in the Arctic are now becoming more common. So we saw hot temperatures in the winter in the Arctic 3 years in a row, and these were all within the past 5 years, so very recently. And we've already seen some emissions from the Arctic, primarily from the thawing of permafrost, but now these emissions are quite large and likely equal to the emissions of Japan or Russia, so they're very substantial. And scientists have said that the Arctic has now transitioned from a carbon sink to a net carbon emitter. So carbon sink is an area that absorbs or sequesters carbon. So for example, the ocean is a carbon sink. And a net carbon emitter is an area that releases more carbon than it absorbs. So the Arctic has gone from absorbing carbon to releasing carbon. And the ice in the Arctic is melting very fast. Greenland's ice is melting 4 times faster than they originally thought. So this is Antarctic ice loss, so on the other pole. And this is the melt rate from the last 40 years, and you can see just how much it's increased over the last 10 years compared to the others. And the South Pole and the North Pole are warming up 3 times faster than the rest of the Earth, and this is causing the ice to melt even faster. This glacier, which is located in West Antarctica, and it's about the size of Florida, it serves as like an anchor or a cork, so it holds the rest of the ice sheet in. And this glacier is expected to melt within the next few decades, and if or when this glacier melts, it will sort of give way for the rest of the ice sheet to melt. So the melting sea ice that we've been talking about heavily contributes to sea level rise, and that's why you see this octopus in a parking garage in Miami. Now, we usually don't see marine life in parking garages in Florida, but it's here because of sea level rise. And sea level rise is a big issue for many reasons, but one of those main reasons is that many of the world's major cities are located on the coast. Now, this is the National Mall in Washington, D.C., and when you think of Washington, D.C., you probably think of people sightseeing, maybe going to see the Washington Monument, maybe having a picnic at the National Mall. But on this day, because of sea level rise, this man was fishing, and he actually caught a fish. So another issue that connects climate change to the oceans is algae blooms. And increased ocean temperature combined with excessive nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen, which are mainly from agricultural runoff, create conditions for algae blooms. So for example, this red tide in Florida killed a lot of marine animals, including this whale shark. Coral bleaching is another issue that comes with warming oceans. So coral polyps have a symbiotic relationship with algae, and when the waters get too warm, the coral expels the algae and they turn white. So the Great Barrier Reef has lost half of its coral in the last 30 years and 30% just in the last 4 years. And this is a problem that's impacting reefs all over the world. And it's an especially big problem because a lot of marine life relies on coral reefs for their habitat, for food, and for shelter. Here's another example of how marine life is impacted by warming oceans. So sea turtle sex is determined by temperature. And in the Great Barrier Reef, 99% of young green sea turtles are now female, so it's greatly disrupting their population and their reproduction. So because of the massive amount of greenhouse gases that we're emitting, the oceans are now 30% more acidic than they were before the Industrial Revolution, and this acidity can have a big impact on marine species. So for example, on the west coast of the US, the acidic water is dissolving the shells of these small snails, which are food for fish. So climate change, along with other factors like habitat loss, are threatening the existence of species around the world. So populations of marine vertebrates, including this humpback whale, have declined about 50% on average from 1970 to 2012. And scientists predict that 40 to 60% of fish species are at risk by the end of this century because the waters will be too warm to support them. And this is an issue obviously for the fish populations themselves, but also for their predators and for us, because about 3 billion people rely on fish as their primary source of protein, and 10% of the world's population relies on fisheries for their livelihood. So I know that was a lot of information and it can be sort of depressing, but there are many promising solutions and people working hard to solve this issue. And I don't want you to feel weighed down or like it's your fault, because it's definitely not. In fact, 100 companies in the world are responsible for 71% of the greenhouse gases. But I do want to leave you with some easy things that you can do and easy switches that you can make in your everyday lives to make a difference. So first, one of the easiest things you can do is vote. So you can vote for candidates that share your values and will work to protect our oceans and our environment. If you're not old enough to vote or you just want to help out more, you can register others to vote and you can write to your representatives. So Oceana makes this really easy. If you're in the United States, you can just enter your address and your name, and you can send a pre-written note to your representative encouraging them to support a certain ocean bill. You can also work to reduce your food waste, because food waste is a really big problem. If food waste were a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases, and 30 to 40% of the US food supply is thrown away. So the problem why food waste is such a big problem is because when put in a landfill, the food waste produces methane, and methane is another greenhouse gas, but it's actually about 30 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So that means that it will hold 30 times more heat. So there are a couple things that you can do to avoid food waste. You can shop mindfully and create a shopping list so that you don't buy more than you need. And this may sound a little funny, but you can also avoid going to the store hungry, because you will probably buy more food than you will eat. And you can also compost, and that's a great way that if you do have food waste, it won't go to the landfill. You can also eat a plant-based diet, which is both great for your health and for the planet. Vegans and vegetarians have lower risk of heart disease, obesity, cancers, and other illnesses. And it's great for the environment because it doesn't create demand for livestock farming, which contributes a lot to greenhouse gas emissions. And lastly, you can shop mindfully. So you can shop at thrift stores for clothing and other items, to shop secondhand instead of creating demand for fast fashion and new clothing. You can also make easy switches around your house. One of the easiest things you can do is buy bamboo toothbrushes instead of plastic ones. And you can also find sustainable companies. So one that I found recently and really love is called By Humankind, and they make sustainable hygiene products like shampoo and conditioner bars and toothpaste tablets. So there are a lot of other amazing companies doing great sustainable work, and there are a lot of things that you can change in your everyday lives and in your homes that are really easy changes to be more sustainable. So thank you for attending. If you want to learn more about climate change impacts and solutions, you can follow my environmental blog on Instagram at ClimateKira, or go to the website climatekira.com. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Kira. That was amazing. Thank you so much. It's so well put together. And I'm excited to learn about Climate Kira. I'll be following you. We had a couple questions that came up in the chat, so we'll start with those, and then we can open it up if anyone wants to ask your question live. So question, let's see, from Kaylin. Kaylin was curious about some of the companies, and if you could elaborate at all on what some of those large companies are that we should be mindful of.
Yeah, so Coca-Cola is a big problem. They use a lot of plastic products, and they're obviously a very large company that has a lot of products. Also, Amazon's not great. Their shipping is not sustainable, and I'm pretty sure that Jeff Bezos gave money to like help combat climate change, but their company is still not very sustainable. So it's sort of like, and it's just like a lot of the big companies that you can think of.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And Abby was wondering, kind of connected to that, if they're mostly in certain countries or areas of the world that we should be thinking about. Are there a lot of, sounds like there's a lot of places that are based here in the States.
Yeah, so a lot of them are like multinational companies that are like global companies. So like Coca-Cola, they are based in the United States, but they distribute all over the world. So I think it's primarily US based companies, but like the big companies that are multinational.
And if I could just follow up on that, with a company like Coca-Cola, is it because they're such a big company that they're one of the top emitters, or because of their unsustainable practices, or a combination?
That's a really good question. I think it's because of the combination. Obviously, they use like plastic bottles for most of their products. So I think it's a combination of those two, like using plastic, and then they just have so many products that it turns into like so much plastic and so much pollution.
Yeah. Thank you.
Kira, I have a question. What you ended on with giving us some ways that we can help in our everyday lives was really great. And one of the things that as an educator, I think a lot about is young, exposing like really young students to the idea of climate change and having it not, I think it can be easy for us to feel hopeless, and that there's
Yeah.
nothing that we can do. And you gave us a couple of really good, really straightforward ways that we can get started by, changing food habits and being mindful shoppers. Do you have any suggestions for communicating with young students, or like our younger siblings, nieces and nephews who learn about climate change, and how we can help to make that not feel like super hopeless, and give them some ways to think about it?
Yeah.
As the next
Well,
generation.
honestly, I haven't talked to a lot of young kids to like explain climate change to them, but I think definitely like making it in terms they can understand and not giving them like shoving a bunch of scientific terms in their face. So I think that is great, and also not just like overloading them with the negative things like the earth is warming, the oceans are warming, like it's all terrible, but to give them like, yeah, like some easy solutions that even they can do, even if they're younger. Maybe things that they can encourage their parents to do, like to vote. So I think the finding the balance between like the problem and then solutions is a great way to try to explain it to young kids.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. I'm going to go into gallery view and just open this up to anybody who would like to ask your question live. Kira, you have a note from Ben. Great job, Kira. Interesting and good tips on what we can do for the environment, from Ben, Ellie, and Aunt Marlo. So if there's anyone else out there who has questions for Kira, you can go ahead and just unmute yourself and ask it here.
I guess this would be more of a comment, but I really like the point about shopping mindfully and doing your research before you go to the store or buy a new product or try a new company. So again, this is more of a comment, but this one time pre-COVID, I was booking a flight and there was the option to do like the carbon offset for an extra $12. So I checked that and went through with it. But then I wondered, well, how are you offsetting carbon? And so I called and, I went through a chain of people who didn't know and redirected me. And I really didn't get a solid answer in the end. And so I guess, do you have any tips or similar experiences for like getting to the bottom of those initiatives that aren't always clear from companies?
Um, that's a good question. I don't know if I've experienced a lot of those things. I think definitely like that happens a lot with the carbon offsets and things like that. So I think it's just better if you can to try it, or if you figure out that the company is actually doing it, then do that. But if you can do it yourself so that you know that you're putting your money into the right place.
Mm-hmm.
But also like systematically, I feel like it's pretty hard to shop like mindfully, because you can try to like reduce the plastic that you buy, but if you go to the grocery store, like everything's in plastic, and if you want like tomatoes, you can't really find like or like certain products, you can't really find them without plastic. So I do think that that's a problem. But yeah, definitely for the initiatives, I think the best way is to just do it yourself if you can, because then you know exactly where your money's going.
Kira, I know within our whale camp community and beyond, there are a lot of passionate young people like yourself who are ready to make change and be advocates, and be like on the ground, being the change makers yourself. And can you tell us a little bit more about the training that you went through and what other resources that we can share with our whale camp community?
Yeah, so I actually did two trainings. The first one I did was through the CLEO Institute, which is based in Miami. And I did a virtual one. So I think in the virtual ones, they train people from around the country, but in the in-person ones, which they usually do not during coronavirus, it's only people from like the area. So you have to be from Florida, but I think they're still doing virtual ones. And so anybody from the country can do that. And then I also did a climate reality training, which is an international global training. I also did that virtually, and that's open to anyone. So anyone here can apply if they're interested. The one I did was spread out over 7 or 8 days, and it was just a couple hours a day, and it was really great. So it touched on the like climate science, impacts, solutions, and then it also was really great because it went into like the intersectionality with other issues like racial justice and finance and things like that. Another thing I would say is to try to find like clubs or groups at your school or in your local community. There are climate reality chapters like around the world, so you can probably find one close to you and join that, and just try to find groups where there's other activists because there's more power in numbers.
I have a question. Do you have any advice on how to deal with people that are like anti-science and climate change and things like that? Because I know like it can be hard to get through to them sometimes, but
Yeah, I have not given like a talk to anybody like that, but I've definitely met people like that. So I think you sort of have to appeal to like their interests. So if they're very religious, like you can appeal to that aspect of climate change. Like we were put on this planet, we're supposed to like protect the planet. So I think it sort of just depends on the person and their perspectives, because if you're just like shoving all your information and you're like, no, you're wrong, like they're not obviously not going to change their mind. But if you try to like appeal to their interests and like figure out what would make the most impact on them.
Kira, I think that's a really great point in that the way that we connect with people is important in being able to, you know, bridge gaps between perspectives and things like that, is to find something that you have in common, to find shared interests, passions, and build those relationships before, you know, giving information or finding those ways to connect with people, for sure. Do we have any other questions? Awesome. Well, I'm going to unmute everyone, or ask everyone to unmute, so we can just give Kira a big round of applause and shout out our thank yous. Awesome job, Kira.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for giving us your time to share what you've been learning. It's always really important for us to be able to provide more info out to our whale camp community, and we encourage those of you that are here, other whale campers, if you have presentation ideas that you'd like to bring to our community, we'd love to hear about it. Maybe we can have a bit of like a series, a camper interest series. Thank you to Kira's friends and family for joining us, our current campers who are in our session right now, campers that I recognize from many of our recent years. Mitch, great to see you.
Good to see you too.
And to our staff for attending. Thanks so much, Kira. And we'll give one more round of applause. Great. This will be recorded and posted on YouTube, so you can feel free to share. I will have that up as soon as it finishes saving to my computer. So I'll have it up in the next 20 minutes or so. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Too.
thanks, Kira.